Two completely different weather stories are playing out across this country right now, and most people only know about one of them. Everybody is watching the heat. Everybody is tracking the severe weather grinding through the plains and the East Coast. And yes, we are going to cover all of that in detail today. But there is a second story unfolding quietly in the northern tier of this country that is not getting nearly the attention it deserves. And for the people it affects most directly, it may actually be the more dangerous story of the two. We are talking about a late May frost event, not a light frost that nips a few flowers, a potentially crop-destroying multi-night hard freeze situation arriving at the single worst possible moment in the growing calendar. On top of that, we have a saturated, relentless rainfall pattern that is going to soak the Deep South, the Ohio Valley, and the East Coast day after day after day from now through the end of May and into early June, with flooding implications that are going to compound steadily the longer it continues. It is Wednesday, May 20th, 2026. We have an enormous amount of ground to cover today. Let's get into all of it. Let's start with where we are right now, because the severe weather sequence that began Monday is not finished yet. Monday's outbreak was one of the most dangerous setups of the spring season, a level 4 moderate risk centered on Kansas City, Wichita, and Lincoln, Nebraska, with EF3 or greater tornado potential, 80-mile-per-hour winds, and baseball-sized hail. Yesterday, Tuesday, that threat stretched its reach from Texas all the way to Vermont and New Hampshire as the cold front pushed east with tornado potential specifically elevated near the Great Lakes region. And today, Wednesday, the system is in its trailing phase. But trailing does not mean finished. Two specific zones are still active today. The I-95 corridor from Washington, D.C. through Baltimore, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts is carrying an isolated severe weather threat this afternoon and evening. This is a marginal risk, level 1 out of 5, meaning widespread outbreak conditions are not expected, but isolated, impactful events are. Damaging winds are the primary concern. An isolated tornado cannot be ruled out. If you are in the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic today, keep your alerts running through the afternoon. For a region that is statistically less prepared for tornado warnings than the Plains states, even a marginal risk day can catch people completely off guard. By the way, if you'd like specific weather forecasts for your region or city, please leave them in the comments. I'll answer them individually as time allows. Also, if you like the video and subscribe to my channel, you'd be very grateful. Now let's move on. Out in West Texas, around Lubbock, Midland, and into southeastern New Mexico, a separate energy impulse is generating stronger storm potential today as well. This western activity is worth watching because it is the seed for the next Southern Plains storm cycle developing Thursday. By Thursday, May 21st, that Four Corners low-pressure system pushes renewed thunderstorm development back across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana. We are already cycling into the next round. The atmosphere is not taking a break this week. For Friday, May 22nd, the Storm Prediction Center has already issued an extended slight risk for the Texas Panhandle and western Oklahoma. A long-range designation that tells you the setup continuing to reload across the southern plains is real, and the severe weather threat does not end at any point this week. Now let's talk about something that I think deserves more urgency than it is currently receiving from most weather coverage. The late May frost threat building across the northern tier of the country. Here is the fundamental problem, and it is all about timing. We are not in early April anymore, where a cold snap rolls through dormant fields and everything just waits it out. Across the northern plains and upper Midwest right now, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan's Upper Peninsula, upstate New York, Vermont, and into the Pacific Northwest, plants are already in full active growth. Corn is up, soybeans are emerging, fruit trees across Michigan and the Great Lakes are in full bloom or already leafed out. Strawberry crops in the Mid-Atlantic are actively fruiting. Vineyards in the Finger Lakes and the Willamette Valley are pushing tender new growth from every single shoot. When you hit vegetation at this stage with a hard frost, you are not slowing it down. You are destroying it. Tender new growth has essentially zero cold tolerance. Drop temperatures below 28 degrees Fahrenheit for more than a couple of hours, and you are looking at catastrophic cell damage. Plant cells literally freeze and rupture from the inside out. That crop does not recover. That fruit set is gone. For small and mid-sized farming operations, that is not an inconvenience. That is the difference between surviving the year financially and not surviving it. Here is what is driving this. A significant upper-level trough, a deep dip in the jet stream, is swinging down out of Canada over the next several days. And here is the detail that makes this particularly nasty. That heat dome baking Texas and Oklahoma and pushing toward the mid-Atlantic is acting as a blocker. It is sitting there like a wall, forcing this cold Canadian air mass to funnel and concentrate rather than spread out and moderate. The cold gets squeezed harder into the northern plains and upper Midwest instead of diffusing gently across the region. The result: overnight lows dropping to the upper 20s and low 30s across a huge swath of the northern plains and upper Midwest by Thursday night into Friday morning, May 22nd into the 23rd. The coldest valley locations, places like the Red River Valley near Fargo, the Minnesota Iron Range around Hibbing, the Lake Plain areas of northern Wisconsin, could see temperatures drop to 26 or even 25 degrees under clear skies with light winds. And clear skies with light winds is actually the worst possible combination for frost, because you lose all protective cloud cover and the air near the surface just radiates heat away into space all night long. And it does not stop after one night. The models are showing this cold pattern potentially producing back-to-back frost nights, Thursday into Friday, and then again Friday into Saturday. 2 consecutive shots at crops that farmers have been tending since March. Beyond that, there is a signal on longer range models for a reinforcing shot of cold air attempting to work back in around May 26th through the 28th, Memorial Day weekend. That would make this a 3-act frost event spread over roughly 10 days. I am not calling that with full confidence yet, and the details will shift as we get closer. But the trend in the data is there, and you need to know it exists. Let me get geographically specific, because this frost threat is not uniform, and where you are matters enormously. The highest risk zone runs from western Minnesota across northern and central Wisconsin through Michigan's Upper Peninsula and into northern lower Michigan, particularly the Traverse City and Petoskey area. By 4 or 5 in the morning on Friday, these locations are looking at 28, 27, potentially 26 degrees in the low spots. The Traverse City region is one of the top cherry-producing areas in the entire United States. Tart cherries, sweet cherries, and those orchards are right now at a critical development stage where even one hard frost night can wipe out 50 to 70% of the crop on a given farm. Michigan agriculture officials are watching this closely, and frost advisories and freeze warnings for that region could be issued as early as today. The second tier of risk covers the eastern Dakotas, Grand Forks, Devil's Lake, Aberdeen, down through the Minnesota River Valley and into parts of Iowa and northern Illinois. Overnight lows in the low to mid-30s put these areas right on the frost line. Do not assume that a forecast low of 33 degrees means you are safe. Cold air drains downhill and pools in valleys and fields overnight. If you are in a low-lying field or river bottom, you can easily be 4 to 5 degrees colder than whatever the official airport reading shows. The third tier, and this one surprises people, covers upstate New York, Vermont, and northern New Hampshire. This air mass has a long reach, and while it will not be quite as intense this far east, low 30s in the valleys and frost on elevated terrain are possible. The apple and wine grape industries across the Finger Lakes, the Hudson Valley, and Vermont are in a genuinely vulnerable position right now. For the Pacific Northwest, specifically eastern Washington, the Palouse region, and western Idaho, the leading edge of this cold air is coming in from the north through the Columbia Basin. Overnight lows Thursday into Friday dropping to the low to mid-30s are a concern for the wheat crop, which is in an active growth phase, and for the hop yards in the Yakima Valley, which will be watching this situation nervously. I want to step back from the agricultural discussion for a moment because it is very easy to talk about frost in terms of farm economics and completely miss the human dimension. There are people across these northern regions who are genuinely vulnerable to a cold snap like this in ways that have nothing to do with crops. Homeless populations in cities like Fargo, Minneapolis, and Milwaukee may have already transitioned to lighter gear because it is mid-May and they expected winter to be behind them. Outdoor construction workers and utility workers may not be dressed for upper 20s temperatures on a Thursday night in late May. Elderly residents living alone in older homes may have already shut down their heating systems for the season because nobody anticipated needing them again. A frost event this late catches people off guard in a way that a February cold snap simply does not, and that is exactly when it becomes dangerous beyond the obvious agricultural losses. If you have older neighbors or you know someone in a difficult living situation, check in on them Thursday night and Friday morning. It costs you nothing. Now let me give you the practical protective measures, because the window to act is closing fast, and Thursday night comes whether you are ready or not. Get your frost cloth and row covers out today. Tender transplants, tomatoes, peppers, basil, squash, cucumbers, anything put out in the last few weeks need to be covered. Frost cloth rated to 26 or 28 degrees Fahrenheit is what you need. Have it ready to deploy Wednesday evening, before temperatures start dropping Thursday night. Do not wait until you see frost forming on the grass. By then, the damage is already starting. Water your soil deeply on Wednesday afternoon. This sounds counterintuitive, but it works. Moist soil holds heat far better than dry soil, and that stored heat radiates upward through the night, raising air temperature near the ground by a degree or two. On a marginal frost night, that buffer can be the difference between damage and survival. For larger-scale fruit and vegetable operations, running overhead irrigation during the frost event is a proven technique. When water freezes on plant tissue, the phase change from liquid to ice actually releases heat, keeping the plant surface right around 32 degrees as long as the water keeps flowing. Orchard operations in Michigan and the Finger Lakes use this every spring. Everything ends up encased in ice and looks catastrophic, but the crop underneath survives. If you manage an orchard operation, get your wind machines checked and ready before Wednesday night. Wind machines mix the warmer air aloft with the colder surface air and can raise temperatures by 3 to 5 degrees. With frost potentially hitting 26 or 27 degrees, that buffer might be exactly enough. Check on your young animals. Newborn lambs, baby goats, young chicks, piglets, anything young and small without adequate supplemental heat is vulnerable. Check your heat lamps. Check barn doors and gaps. Late-season cold snaps kill more young livestock than people realize, simply because farmers assume the worst is behind them by mid-May. It is not behind you yet. Now let's zoom out and look at what is coming from the rainfall side of this pattern, because the precipitation story building over the next 2 weeks is extraordinary. Starting Thursday and accelerating through the weekend, the Deep South, Ohio Valley, Gulf Coast, Mid-Atlantic, and East Coast are entering what can only be described as a relentlessly saturated pattern. Day after day after day of rainfall chances, repeated rounds of heavy showers and thunderstorms, driven by persistent Gulf moisture surging northward, and a jet stream pattern that keeps funneling systems across the same regions repeatedly. The European model has taken what I would describe as a significant leap upward, not a step, a leap, in its precipitation projections for the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Deep South over the coming 2 weeks. We are now looking at 5 to 10 inches of total precipitation across much of the Deep South and Southeast over just the next couple of weeks. The GFS model is in strong agreement with the general pattern, though slightly different in its focus area. When both major models trend toward the same heavy rainfall signal at the same time, that agreement is meaningful. This is not a modeling artifact. This is a real, sustained wet pattern that is going to define the end of May. Let's walk through it day by day so you understand the scope of what is coming. Thursday, May 21st. The South Central states, Deep South, Southeast, and Mid-Atlantic all see significant precipitation arriving as Gulf warmth and moisture surge northward. This is the beginning of the prolonged wet stretch, not a one-day event. Friday, May 22nd. Rainfall continues across essentially the same corridor. A slight risk for severe weather exists in the Texas Panhandle and western Oklahoma on Friday. A separate convective threat riding in behind the main precipitation area. Saturday through Sunday, May 23rd and 24th. The wet pattern persists across the Gulf states, Midwest, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Great Lakes. Even the Rockies are seeing precipitation in a horseshoe pattern, heavy in the mountains, heavy up the East Coast, with the upper Midwest sitting in a relatively drier pocket in between. Memorial Day weekend, May 25th. Another round of low pressure pushes into the upper Midwest with thunderstorm potential. The South Central and Southeast are still very much in the wet pattern. Rainfall totals for areas like Houston could reach 6 to 10 inches through this period, a number that demands serious attention given Houston's flooding history and the drought-hardened soil that will struggle to absorb rain at that rate. May 26th through the 29th, the precipitation does not stop. Day after day across the southeastern corner of the nation and the south-central states, heavy rainfall continues. There is even a signal developing around May 29th of a potential nor'easter-type effect along the East Coast, with lower pressure in the eastern Gulf helping to enhance coastal activity. We will be watching that closely as we get closer. Into early June, the wet pattern across the east continues. A new storm system developing at the tail end of the model, run for the Rockies and northern plains, suggests the active pattern does not simply end at the June 1st boundary. What does all of this rainfall mean in practical terms? It means flooding is going to become an increasingly significant and compounding threat across the Deep South, Gulf Coast, and Ohio Valley as this pattern progresses. You are not dealing with a single heavy rainfall event on a dry landscape. You are dealing with repeated rounds of heavy rain on soil that is already saturating, in river basins that are already running elevated, in drainage systems that are already stressed. The flooding risk does not stay constant through this period. It builds. Every additional inch that falls raises the risk for the next round. For Texas and Louisiana specifically, the drought conditions that have been entrenched across the southern plains mean the initial rainfall will be absorbed somewhat, but the pace of delivery is almost certainly going to outrun the ground's absorption capacity. Flash flooding in drought-affected areas is a real and underappreciated hazard. The same ground that has been baked dry for weeks can produce runoff very quickly when rain falls faster than the hardened soil can take it in. For the Mississippi River system and its tributaries, repeated heavy rainfall events across a wide portion of the central and eastern watershed over 2 or more consecutive weeks will eventually translate into river rises. The lower Mississippi Valley, already dealing with elevated moisture, will need to be watching river gauges carefully as May progresses into June. Let's talk about the temperature picture as context for everything else, because the thermal contrast across this country right now is striking even by spring standards. The eastern United States is still running deep into early summer territory today. The Mid-Atlantic saw temperatures approaching the mid-90s on Tuesday, with records challenged across New York City, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Some of those records date back more than a century. The cold front pushing through today will bring dramatic relief to the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic by Thursday, temperatures dropping from the mid-90s back into the 70s within 24 hours. Thursday will be a genuinely refreshing day across much of the northern tier as northwest flow settles in behind the front. Meanwhile, behind this front, the northern plains and Rockies are a completely different world. Record cold high temperatures in the 20s and 30s across Wyoming and Colorado, snow on the roads outside Cheyenne and Denver. The thermal gradient across the country right now is one of the steepest of the entire spring season, and that gradient is the engine powering both the severe weather and the frost threat simultaneously. As we head toward the weekend and into next week, the warmth rebuilds. By Sunday, May 24th, mid-80s return across a large portion of the nation's midsection. By late next week, the heat that has been entrenched over Texas and Oklahoma begins pushing northward and eastward again. The back-and-forth temperature pattern, cold nights, warm days, cold again in the northern tier, is a signature of the split-flow jet stream pattern that looks like it wants to persist well into early June. This is not a pattern that resolves cleanly into a comfortable spring finish. It is volatile, it is restless, and it is not done producing weather events. There is also an unusual model signal worth mentioning for the longer range. Around the 10-day mark, a backdoor cold front may attempt to push colder air southwestward down the east coast. A backdoor cold front comes from the northeast rather than the northwest, which is unusual and can catch people off guard with how quickly it cools temperatures along the coastal corridor. The models are not fully committed to this scenario yet, and I am not placing high confidence in it at this range. But it is worth flagging as something to watch as we move through next week. Let's bring all of this together into what it means for you right now based on where you live. If you are in the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic today, keep your severe weather alerts active through this afternoon and evening. The isolated threat along the I-95 corridor is real, and enjoy the cool down arriving Thursday. It is well earned after a brutal heat stretch. If you are in western Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the Traverse City region, the Finger Lakes, upstate New York, or Vermont, your window to prepare for this frost event is today and tomorrow. Get frost cloth out tonight. Water your soil Wednesday afternoon. Check your irrigation systems. Secure your young animals. Do not let the date on the calendar convince you that frost cannot happen. May 22nd can devastate a cherry orchard. May 23rd can kill your tomatoes. The cold is real. It is deep enough to do lasting damage, and it may come in multiple waves over the next 10 days. If you are in the eastern Dakotas, northern Iowa, or northern Illinois, you are on the frost line for Thursday and Friday nights. Low-lying areas and river bottoms will be colder than official forecasts suggest. Treat the low 30s forecast as a 28-degree forecast for your fields and gardens. If you are along the Gulf Coast from Houston to New Orleans to Mobile, the flooding picture is building. 6 to 10 inches of rainfall through Memorial Day weekend is a real possibility for the Houston metro. Prepare now. Know your local flood-prone areas. Know your evacuation routes if you are in a flood-vulnerable location. If you are in the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, or Deep South, the sustained wet pattern from Thursday through the end of May means repeated flooding potential. This is not a one-day heavy rain event. It is a 2-week saturated pattern. Keep your flood awareness elevated throughout. If you are in the Texas Panhandle or western Oklahoma, a slight risk for severe weather on Friday is already on the books. Stay tuned as that system sharpens over the next 24 to 48 hours. 2 completely different weather stories. One country, both of them real. Both of them deserve your full attention right now. We are going to be tracking every piece of this pattern as it evolves. The frost, the flooding, the severe weather, and the tropical signals building quietly in the background for the opening of hurricane season. Stay weather aware, stay prepared, and we will see you in the next update. Stay safe.